We're laughing. We're Zach and I are having fun.
All right. You ready? Okay.
Quiet on the set.
The Big Fat American Rock Show spares no expense, using the finest reel-to-reel machines, 8-tracks, cassettes, and vinyl. Broadcasting from a state-of-the-art 1955-era rock and roll bomb shelter. Here's your crazy uncle, Zach Martin.
We have a special broadcast we're doing right now from the Big Fat American Studios. I have my good friend, Mike Levine, who is the vice president of the NephCure Foundation. But that's not the complete title of the NephCure Foundation. Give us your entire title, like the Lord of Lords, the Baron of whatever, the King of, that Bugs Bunny bit. Remember that? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Zach. Thank you for having me. So the entire name of NephCure is the NephCure Kidney International Foundation, and it can be found at www.nephcure.org. O-R-G.
Listen, he spells that really fluently, like very easily spelled. I've been involved with NephCure for many years now. We first met in 2007. I'm going to say 2007. How old is Matthew now?
Matthew is 16.
Okay. Yeah. I think he was so that's about 10 years ago.
Yes.
All right. I'm trying to figure out the math. It doesn't really matter. But, and there's another tie-in to it. My mom suffered from renal carcinoma. But you didn't know that at the time, and it was never brought up. So it was something that I guess I was automatically, thought about it. I have to help. But before we even got to that part, you really made it all about Matthew, and I can see the pain on your face long ago. It's still it's not even a faded memory. It's like fresh in my mind. You were over in the waiting area at WFAN in Astoria. There was that fancy massage chair that was sitting over there. You might have been sitting in that or next to it. I came to you, asked you who you were going to see. I said, well, after that meeting, you come and see me. We don't need to bring any names. And exactly what I said happened. The reason why I could see on your face that there was a major issue that we had to deal with was just so obvious. But my first impression was, here's a dad who is willing to do anything, not only to save the life of his son, but others affected by it. So it was never a selfish thing. It was a selfless thing and a loving thing. What particular malady, I'll call it, or disease, as I guess would be the clinical, does Matthew have?
So Matthew has a disease that's called FSGS. That's 4 letters, FSGS. The long of it is focal segmental glomerular sclerosis.
Mm-hmm.
It is known as the most devastating kidney disease on the planet, with no known cause and no known cure. And FSGS is the leading cause of kidney failure in children in the world.
So it could happen to anybody. There's no genetic markers for FSGS that they've found so far?
Well, that's a great question, Zach. It turns out that they're checking the genetic markers, and they think there are some genetic types of FSGS. What we do know is 25 years ago, FSGS was predominantly known as an African-American adult male disease. One gentleman afflicted with FSGS, actually 2 in the NBA, is Alonzo Mourning and Sean Elliott. They've both had kidney transplants from FSGS. But it seems as though the problem with FSGS is it's growing, it's evolving, and it's morphing. And as you said at the start of this conversation, FSGS is now afflicting all ages, all colors, and all genders. So you can get FSGS whether you're white, black, male, female. You can get FSGS when you're 6 years old. You can get FSGS when you're 62 years old, and it could put you in immediate kidney failure.
So out of nowhere, you can get FSGS.
The scary thing about FSGS is that, yes, it can show up at 6 months old or 62 years old. You could be spilling proteins.
Oh, my God.
Spilling proteins and show up out of nowhere.
That is scary. That's really a scary thing to think about, especially when it's got no genetic traits that anybody can, I guess, map at this particular point. That's why research is so important. But at the same time, I've seen on Facebook and through social media and my own research that there's a lot of advances that have been taking place in the past 10 years for how we attack this disease and kidney disease overall. I mean, we're this close to, I guess, making some sort of hybrid kidneys by using certain types of stem cells. And then there's also the robotic solutions. have any sort of, I guess, information in that regard? Like, what's the latest?
So, Zach, another great question. So you just brought up two topics. So the first thing is the incredible news over the last 2 or 3 years is that with the help of NephCure and the funding of NephCure, we've actually gone from 2 drugs to 24 drugs that are now in clinical trials and clinical studies that will be utilized in humans. So it's 2 drugs to 24 drugs in the last 2 to 3 years that they think might be able to either cure these patients or cure FSGS and nephrotic syndrome patients or help these patients live, quote unquote, long, normal lives. In addition to that, you brought up the mechanical bionic kidney. They use a lot of different terms. We're actually funding research with the bionic kidney, if you will, and mechanical kidney, which they think is somewhere between 2 to 5 years out, that they're going to be able to use these kidneys, these mechanical bionic kidneys. They're going to be utilized so that these FSGS patients, these nephrotic syndrome patients, the diabetic patients, so as an alternative to dialysis, they think that they're going to have these kidneys within human trials within the next 2 to 5 years, which would be obviously something incredible. And we're actually, NephCure is helping fund some of that research as we speak.
What if they combine stem cells and the robotics? How about that?
So obviously,
cyborg kidney.
Obviously, Zach, that would be incredible. We're actually, obviously, stem cells, as we all know, is the next thing of the future for all diseases. So yes, if we were able to ever combine and utilize stem cells and the bionic kidney, there might be something incredible on the horizon. But needless to say, Zach, the unfortunate thing is that with NephCure is that we raise about $4.3 million a year.
Need more.
We need a lot more. When you raise $4.3 million, the problem with FSGS and nephrotic syndrome and the NephCure Foundation, and Zach, I thank you so much for helping us, is that we have an incredible identity crisis as we speak. Not nearly enough Americans know about FSGS, nephrotic syndrome, and the NephCure Foundation, and that's what we're here trying to change, and that's what we got to change. It's a must.
Well, I think if we just keep delivering the message and we're consistent with that and we're active on social media and we get in front of politicians and we have people that speak up and say something, that's one key. Let me ask you this question. We hear a lot about living donors. I know a couple of them myself. The option is a living donor, and if you do get a kidney transplant with FSGS, does that cure the FSGS, or is there a chance it comes back? How does that work? So
Zach, that's another great question. That's probably the scariest part of FSGS and nephrotic syndrome, in that 50% of the time the FSGS comes back in the transplanted kidney. So a kidney transplant is not a cure in any means, way, or fashion. It's a stopgap. There's actually a gentleman on Long Island who I think is about 43 now. He's had 4 kidney transplants from his battle with FSGS, and all 4 times the FSGS has attacked the transplanted kidney. And there's a young lady on Long Island. She's about 21 years old. She had a kidney transplant. She waited 3 years on a donor list to get the kidney, and within 1 hour of the transplant, the FSGS attacked the new kidney, and now she just got her second kidney, and she just turned 21 years old.
I hate FSGS. I can't stand this disease. It's a hideous one. It mutates. It almost seems like it's a living organism that has its own way of thinking and trying to. It's doing what organisms do. It's trying to survive in it's an environment. So yeah, it's a pesky one.
It's beyond pesky, because as we said, it's morphing, it's growing. They're actually saying that now. The numbers, Zach, are with chronic kidney disease. I think it's 1 in every 3 Americans will battle chronic kidney disease in their lifetime. 37 million Americans are battling chronic kidney disease as we speak, which is 1 in every 7 adults. We spend $112 billion a year on chronic kidney disease patients and dialysis patients. So the numbers are off the charts. And as you were saying before, the interesting thing to add on to what you were saying before, Zach, is that they believe the kidneys are the next uncharted territory, because they believe that the research and the dollars that are going to be generated by kidneys now, because the kidneys is like the last uncharted territory in the body, and it's been so disrespected for forever. Now there's these pharmaceutical companies and the politicians and the doctors are starting to realize that the dollar signs that can be created with the kidneys.
There you go. I mean, then when it's the dollar signs for the treatment that can be created, then the cure is the last thing on their mind. That's one of the problems, right? We all know how that goes. But thank God for the pharmaceutical companies. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's great that they have developed these drugs. With these new class of drugs, what kind of results are they getting? And I'll ask Matthew on his own how he's doing on it, but you as the dad being aware of what Matthew takes, how's that working out for Matthew's treatment?
Well, the very good news about Matthew is that Matthew is stable. His kidney function is stable, which is miraculous. The doctor has actually used the word miraculous. He's stable. He takes about 12 to 15 pills a day now, just that limits his high cholesterol, his high blood pressure, his vitamin D deficiency, and his anemia. With reference to the new drugs that are coming online, Zach, they think, as I said, they've gone from 2 drugs to 24 drugs, and they believe that these drugs may either be some sort of cure for FSGS and nephrotic syndrome, or they may have these children or adults live long, normal adult lives with their battles with FSGS and nephrotic syndrome. The scary thing is, Zach, is that some doctors have uttered the words to me personally. They said a battle with FSGS or nephrotic syndrome is sometimes worse than a battle with cancer because the drugs that you take are so harsh. Yeah. There are so many unknowns with FSGS and nephrotic syndrome. It's like a moving target. Yep. Unlike cancer, where they know what they're treating, they know with the cancer what they're treating, they know what drugs treat it, they know what they're combating. With FSGS and nephrotic syndrome, I used to say, and I still say, that battling FSGS and nephrotic syndrome are like walking on dark in the glass, walking on glass in the dark every day, because you never know what this disease is going to do to the human body next.
What is the average cost per month for these medicines that Matthew has to take? Because one of my concerns is, even if we come up with treatment and the medicines, I know across the country, a lot of people won't be able to afford those kind of things. So what kind of support are we giving people that have less means? Well,
Zach, another great question. Fortunately, we've been very lucky. In most of the cases, most of Matthew's medications, they've been covered by insurance. But more importantly, most of Matthew's medications, myself, Dana, my wife Dana, we made a decision early on, and it wasn't a decision that was liked by my mother at the time, but it was a scary decision. We decided to put Matthew in clinical trials and clinical studies, so on and so forth, because we knew that he would get the best care there. Right. He would get the best care. And while he was in these clinical trials and clinical studies, because they were clinical trials and clinical studies, the medications were paid for through the clinical trials and clinical studies. So we were very lucky at the time when Matthew was battling at his harshest battle. He's 16 now. He was diagnosed when he was 2.5 years old. His harshest battle was age 3, 4, 5. When he was taking these medications, we had him in these clinical trials and clinical studies. And because my mother was afraid, because they were scary medications, they didn't know the exact side effects, but they knew that it could kick this thing into some sort of remission. And there were only 3 or 4 drugs in the entire world that may kick this thing into some sort of remission. So we had to take a shot. And we took a shot in these clinical trials and clinical studies, and it was the way to go because Matthew got the best care, A, and to answer your question, B, the medications were all paid for by the clinical trials and clinical studies. So we were very lucky when we were knee deep in this battle, 12, 13 years ago.
How can NephCure, the foundation, help people that are suffering from various kidney ailments, including FSGS?
So that's a great question, Zach. So the NephCure Foundation does incredible work with FSGS and nephrotic syndrome patients around the country and around the world. We're growing in leaps and bounds. The interesting part to your question there, Zach, the best way I can answer that question is that we have a scientific advisory board, and we have major doctors around the country and around the world working on FSGS and nephrotic syndrome research, the leading kidney disease experts in the world. They actually believe that since there are so many properties similar in FSGS, nephrotic syndrome, diabetes, and all the other major kidney diseases in the world, since they have similar properties, they believe that if we unlock the doors to FSGS and nephrotic syndrome, we may unlock the doors to diabetes and all the other major kidneys in the world. So the research we're doing is phenomenal. It's incredible. The problem is that when you raise $4.3 million a year and it takes $1 billion to bring a new drug to market in this country, obviously we got to raise a lot more awareness, a lot more exposure, and raise a lot more dollars for critical research. And then we may unlock the doors for all these kidney diseases and save a lot of lives.
A lot of times when people aren't afflicted from a condition or disease, let's just take HIV for a second and AIDS. There's a hesitancy. If it's not something that I'm affected by, I'm not going to give any money towards that because, hey, I don't do that kind of stuff or it doesn't affect me. But what you'll find, and you brought light to this, is if you give money to an organization like NephCure, when they go in search of a cure for one disease and find new drugs for what they intend to treat a disease with, a lot of times they'll find that these medications and these procedures that they invent or they research work well with diseases that have nothing to do with what they were trying to cure. So HIV, because of the HIV research, they have better drugs that help fight cancer. Now people are undetectable. There's medicines where you can be undetectable. There's medicines that can prevent the transmission of that disease. Or a lot of people in the United States end up getting diabetes, like you said, and when they're younger, they don't think about that. But because of NephCure and for people like Matthew that are taking these trials and the benefits that could go towards somebody that has diabetes and how they can protect their kidneys, it all works together. So I would encourage more people to give, even if it's something that you don't think affects you now. One day it will affect you.
Well, the interesting thing, Zach, you just said two very important words. So I've been taught, number one, the only disease that's really cropped up and cropped up is not a very good word, but the only disease that's come about in our lifetime where they've actually found a cure is HIV. And the reason why they found a cure for HIV is because they knew that so many people were going to die.
That's right.
So quickly that all political barriers and all doctor barriers and all hospital barriers in the world were broken down, and everybody was forced to work together and share all the information together, and that's how they found a cure for HIV.
They're able to, like, not exactly a cure, but make it undetectable, so it's always in the background. It's one of those things that could, pop out at any time. But yeah, I've worked with a lot of patients with HIV over the years because of my daughter Sophie.
Right.
And, that was the lesson that I learned on that. And also, and this really has to bug you. I know for Boomer, with his son that has cystic fibrosis and other people that also are afflicted by this, which affects the kidneys, it affects your GI tract, your sight, all of these different things. How people don't take care of themselves. They eat horrible foods, they smoke, they do drugs. They just take their body for granted. And because of that, sooner or later, there's going to be payback. You're going to pay for all of those things. Maybe not now, but 20 years from now, 25 years from now. I myself, I had to redirect when I seen some of the struggles that some of the people go through, like Matthew, like, Gunnar. I thought, well, listen. And then I have family members who ended up with diabetes through it's their own fault, okay? They just were not eating properly. I go, I got to avoid that. So ever since just around the time I met you and just around the time that I got involved with BEF, as well as some personal issues at home, I've done all I can to lose as much weight as possible and eat as healthy as possible. I think that that's one of the things that I've really thought about over the years. We can't take our lives for granted, can't take anything for granted because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. It's also important to become a donor, an organ donor. It's also important if you think that you physically can handle it, at least for bone marrow and stuff like that. Maybe it doesn't have to be donating a kidney, but becoming a living donor. The other thing is, and I think this is really important because you've gone through this, what is the key advice you would give as a dad, as a husband, to somebody who finds out that one of their loved ones, whether it's a child, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a spouse, a parent, gets devastating news. What's the next step when you get that news? What did you do? What would you tell somebody else to do?
Well, you know what? I think it's like a 3 or 4 pronged attack, Zach. I remember when Matthew was diagnosed with FSGS at Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx, the 2 social workers came up to us immediately upon the devastating diagnosis. We were told that it's the most devastating kidney disease on the planet with no known cure, and Dana and I wanted to crawl into a hole. And the 2 pieces of advice that the social workers gave us, they said, the first thing they said is don't gravitate towards your son because it'll have a negative effect or adverse effect upon your daughter. So we've always lived by that. And upon the diagnosis, I was very depressed for a while. And then, I said, you know what, we can't live like this. The advice I'd give to any parent is go online, look up the disease, look up the doctors around the country and around the world that can help you combat this, hike up your bootstraps, and then you just start fighting every day. And you say to yourself, failure is not an option. We're never going to give up. We're going to keep fighting, keep battling. We're going to look for a cure. We're going to go to any doctor in the world that knows anything. In this specific case, it was about FSGS and nephrotic syndrome. My wife and myself, we just started looking all over the internet and started calling people, friends, doctors, and tried to find out anything we could about FSGS and nephrotic syndrome. And Zach, I said to everybody today that failure is not an option. We're never going to give up hope. We're going to keep fighting, and until we find a cure for all the children and adults and all the people all over the world battling this disease, the word failure will never come into the equation, and we'll just keep battling and battling and battling until we find a cure, because there is too many warriors battling this disease around the world, waiting for us to deliver a cure, and we can never ever let them down.
How many times did you watch Apollo 13?
I have watched Zach. I have watched Apollo 13 numerous times. I love the movie. I've watched it thousands of times, and every time they hit the water, every time Tom Hanks hits the water, and he says, "Apollo 13 signing off," the tears run down my face. Forever, because obviously watching what they went through and what they battled and how they survived is obviously an incredible. One of my favorite movies, Zach, now is I'll tell you that I cry to all the time, that Dana knows and Matthew knows, is I watched the movie Rudy. And watching Rudy, what Rudy battled at Notre Dame and what he went through is the tears roll down every time he gets on the football field, and he was never supposed to be there. Watching him get through that battle brings tears to my eyes, knowing what we've gone through and knowing we have so much more to do and so much more to accomplish.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but he was offside in the real play. Anyway, I have to, like that. I'm like, he was offside the whole time.
Is that true? Is that true, Zach?
What I understand,
is that
yes.
true, Zach? That's
who's going to blow the flag on that play?
Zach,
you're going to be a jerk.
Zach, you just destroyed my whole mantra of the whole movie.
Look, this is how life is. The Apollo 13, you had to put the round peg in the square hole kind of thing when they make the air filters, and they were like throwing a. Failure is not an option, and I think that's a great movie to watch over and over again. It really teaches you some valuable lessons. When you're against the wall, you got to do everything you can to fight your way back. And the same thing with Rudy. Even though he was offside, it is a great story. But I like putting that in there just for fun.
Hey, Zach, but that's perfect to your last point. And just remember this, Zach, with this disease, and what you said on your previously, you said that you'll never know when this affects somebody in your family. But if you think about it this way, that 1 in every 2 Americans, or I think it's 1 in every 3 Americans, will now battle chronic kidney disease in their lifetime. So if there's 5 people in your family, 2 or 3 people will battle this disease. I think it was just 2 years ago. They said 80,000 Americans lost their battle to chronic kidney disease, which is more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined.
Well, and even if it's not like a deadly chronic disease, people have kidney stones. I never knew anybody with kidney stones. Now I know a lot of people with kidney stones. That's something's going on.
Zach, that's polycystic kidney disease, which is another thing. I mean, Zach, you're talking as a radio personality, but you're obviously, you know a lot more than this than you let on to be. You could probably be a doctor. So that's polycystic kidney disease, which is also in this family, where you develop your body develops kidney stones. So yes, so that's all part of all part of the equation. All of this stuff is all put into the blender. I actually said to Matthew's doctor at Montefiore Hospital, I said, why are these diseases becoming so prominent now in the last 10, 12, 15, 20, 25 years? I said, is it the water pollution? Is it the air pollution? Is it the cell phones? Is it the power lines? And he says, Michael, I wish I had the answer to that, but it's probably a combination of all those things. Put all that in a blender, and this is the unfortunate what spits out at the bottom of the blender at the end of the day.
Before we talk to Dana and then later on Matthew, I'd like you to tell us if you have a hero in this battle.
So, Zach, my hero in this 13 and a half year battle and 13 and a half year journey is my son, Matthew. He's been battling FSGS for 13 and a half years. His cholesterol has reached 375. His blood pressure's through the roof. He's vitamin D deficient, and he's anemic, and he takes 12 to 15 pills a day to battle all this, and that's why he is my hero. And every day during this battle, he has fought and he has smiled for the past 13 and a half years.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, he's an inspiration and hero to all of us. Anybody that can put up with all of that stuff and really be happy and go lucky is a lesson to be learned for all of us. What lesson have you learned along this battle?
So, you know what, Zach, that's another great question. So, if there's two things I could teach your audience with this 13 and a half year battle against this devastating kidney disease that has no cure, has no known cause, and that destroys lives, destroys families, lives, and kidneys in its path, I would love to teach your audience two things. Number one, the way we found this in Matthew when he was 2.5 years old, he was waking up and he looked like Rocky Balboa. His eyes were 80% closed, and it looked like he had two softballs above his eyes. So I've learned that we retain water in three parts of our body. It's our eyelids, our stomach, and our ankles. So if you ever see anybody blown up, whether it's friend, family, business associates, blown up in their eyelids, their stomach, or their ankles, you should immediately get them taken to the doctor, pediatrician, whatever it is, family doctor. And if you see them blown up in their eyelids, their stomach, or their ankles, you should immediately get their blood tested and or a urinalysis or both, because that probably means there's something wrong with the kidney function, and that could be detected immediately by a blood test and or a urinalysis. That's how we found this in Matthew. That's number one. Number two, I've been told that the United States is one of the only countries in the world where children, you go for a physical, as an adult, you go for a physical every year, and they take your blood and they check your urine. So what I'm telling you here and now isn't something that you should do from this day going forward. After you hear this interview with the great Zach Martin, is that you should understand that if you have children at home or grandchildren at home, you should make sure that whenever they get a physical every year, they should make sure that included in that physical is a blood test and or a urinalysis or both, because tests of this nature could detect immediately what's wrong inside with your kidneys or other. And while there's no known cure for a disease like FSGS, nephrotic syndrome, early detection means you could start battling this early on, and a blood test and urinalysis could tell the tale right away. So what I'm telling you is from this day going forward, after you hear this interview, is make sure your children or grandchildren, when they go for a yearly physical, make sure they get a blood test and or a urinalysis.
Follow BFA on Facebook at Big Fat American. Zach Martin on Twitter at Zach Martin Rocks. And Zach Martin on Instagram. Wait, Zach is on Instagram? I can guarantee he has no clue how to use that. See all the interviews and videos at ZachMartinRocks.com.